Hello there, how's it going? Welcome to my video where I'm going to be telling you all about my experience running a market booth business. I've been doing this for a long time and I have been recently posting some videos or I've been getting some questions, and also I've been getting a lot of questions from other vendors over the years that I thought I'll put together a little intro to running a market business vid. So that's what we're going to do today. And I have basically, the format is going to be, I've got a couple questions I've come up with that I've heard a lot, or just questions I get a lot, and I'm going to answer those and give you my best advice. So that's basically the idea. My name is Rebecca. I live in Nova Scotia, Canada. I have been running market businesses since 2018, so that's 6 years, going on 6 years now. And I've been doing this for two different businesses that are still running. One of them is my art business, which is Lucky Sprout Studio. That's the name of my YouTube channel. And I sell art and art related things. And the other business is called South Shore Sea Salt. This is a sea salt manufacturing company that I started in 2017 or late 2017, and I started doing markets in 2018. And that business is culinary sea salts that we produce. I am not really involved in that business anymore because I took on my mom as a partner after a couple of years, and then I gave my share of that business to my brother. So now they run it, but we participate in markets together all the time. I help with other stuff. So I have experience doing both a food business and an art business, which are extremely different. There is some overlap in terms of the market experience, but for those two kinds of vendors, there's a lot of different things going on. So I'm going to share with you my best advice about that. I've got all my notes written down here, so I won't forget anything I want to tell you, but I've been doing all kinds of markets in the past. I've done special events, art markets, markets in a field. I've done farmers markets, pop-ups, special events they were like, bring in some artisans, like pretty much everything you can imagine. And I've had market success from, I've done hard work for $0, and I've had weekends where I've made thousands of dollars in one go. So it's really all over the map. I think I've got a lot of experience and I'm very happy to share it. So let's dive in. There really is a lot to cover in running this kind of business, so I won't be able to do it all in one video. I would like to make more on topics like setting up displays and how to display your products, figuring out what table orientation to do, how to price your products, what to bring, like all of that. I got a lot of experience. I don't need to keep saying that. Sorry. I've seen a lot of different variations of everything and I have my opinions on what works well. So I will be happy to share those. Please let me know what you would like to see me talk about next. But let's get into talking about those questions that I get a lot from newbie vendors or people interested in doing this kind of business. So the first question I always get is this thing a good idea for a market business? The people asking me this, it could be something that they're already making. Maybe they sell it online. Maybe it's a hobby, so they already have some experience doing it. Or maybe it's just an idea that they had and they're like, I want to try starting this. Would this be a good idea? This is a really hard question to answer because there's going to be so many variables, of course. But I do have sort of 4 benchmarks that I always check for if I'm going to have a new idea. And I am an ideas person. I have way too many ideas. Luckily, I have executed a lot of them and I have found some success with them. So I know that like having a good process through which you eliminate your ideas or go through to decide if they're viable is really important. Otherwise, you waste a lot of your time. And I've wasted a lot of time on ideas. So the very first thing that I ask, is there a balance between the uniqueness of your idea and the demand for the product? So there is a lot of saturation of certain things at markets. You're going to see a lot of jewelry vendors. You're going to see a lot of soap makers, a lot of candles. There's like a few big hitters that are always there. And that's okay because there's a lot of demand for those products, especially at these kinds of events. But if you're at an event and there's 6 candle makers and you're one of them, how do you make your product stand out? How do you make someone go, oh, that's the right one for me, as opposed to that booth over there? And that's going to come down to a lot of factors like the types of products you offer, the colors or styles you choose, the way you display your products. All those things matter. So if you're really fixed on selling a product that you think there's a lot of other people selling, you have to decide what makes you unique, or if it's just a too saturated market, you should try something else. You also don't want to make something that is too outside the comfort zone of the shoppers at these types of events. So I love unique stuff, and often it can find a better home online where you can find a really targeted niche customer base. But at an event, you have people who you want to make sure that they're actually going to want to buy your stuff. keep having this idea where I want to make custom light shade, like lampshades, because I've seen a lot of videos of people doing it. I think it seems really fun and it overlaps a lot of my crafty skills. But I just know the nightmare of selling custom lampshades at an event would probably be not worth it for me. So that's just how I rolled out that particular idea, which is good because, again, also transportation. So a lot of factors you have to think, especially if you're building something big. I see a lot of sign vendors encounter this issue if you're doing wooden signs. Just transportation can be a real nightmare. And if you're just a business of one person, that's really something to keep in mind, but the viability as well. Okay, that was a long one. I'm going to try and make the other points faster. So uniqueness versus demand. The next one is your ability to create inventory. How fast can you make this thing and how much of it can you make? Because that's going to really make or break certain businesses. If you are at an event where you sell out, it's a multiple day event, can you go home and whip up some more? Or do you have time, ample time before the event to make such a quantity of inventory that won't be a problem? I've definitely seen people, especially in more time-consuming artisanal crafts, pottery, metalwork, anything like that, where it just takes a long time to make the stuff. So you have to have enough time to dedicate and make sure your prices can balance out that time consumption as well. So can you create inventory? Number 3, profit margin. Are you actually going to make any money on this product? That's hard, and some people are not number inclined. I get that. I have number dyslexia. It makes it really hard sometimes. But I take my profit margins extremely seriously. That's how I can do this full time. So you have to make sure that there's actually profit to be made in your product. And sometimes that takes some serious number crunching. It may not be super obvious what the value of your labor is, especially if it's something you love doing. We really encountered this as an issue with the sea salt company because figuring out when you take a jar's worth of product, how much labor does that actually cost? And that took a lot of complicated figuring out. For a long time, we were selling it for way too cheap. And that's why the business was hard to get off the ground, honestly. So you have to make sure your product actually can make you some money. And the last point for whether this is a good idea for a market, honestly, does it display well? Is there a good way that you can make people want to walk up to your booth and stop? Because there's some products that are just hard to display if they're flat or if they're heavy or if they're big. You're going to have to be really tactical with how you design your booth because the number one thing that's going to sell your products is people wanting to stop and look at your products. So that's going to be an important factor. If your idea passes all of those tests, well, then maybe it's a good idea. It sounds like it's a good one so far. Okay, the second question I get a lot is a lot more technical, and it is, do I need to be a registered business or have licenses or insurance or whatever to run my business at a market? This question has a kind of frustrating answer, which is it depends a lot on where you live. Different countries and even different states or provinces have different rules about that. So you do have to look up where you specifically are to be clear on that. If that is confusing, I recommend reaching out to some other vendors in your area, other small businesses who do markets, to find out what they think or what their experience has been. Talking to the people has by far been the best way for me to learn about this business. In most cases, you can get started without too much fuss. It depends on the kind of event you're doing, but in most cases, they're a little more casual, but there are some exceptions to that, so I will get to that in a minute. So first of all, do you need to register a business? Typically, that's going to be a little bit more important when you're earning a certain threshold and you have to start to pay taxes. But also, if you have a trade name that you want to register, that is a good reason to do it. Registering a business means a lot of different things in different places. Where I live in Canada, we can do a sole proprietor business, which costs, I think it's like $130 all in to get started, and half of that is just saving your name, your business name. The other half is like the registration fee. Here, it's a good idea to do that just because you technically can't operate under a business name other than your own name without doing that. And this is for a business you're going to be declaring on your taxes, obviously. And the other thing is you want to make sure that there isn't another business registered with that name already, because if you build your business sort of unregistered under a certain name and you've got reputation and people know you as that, and then you are like, I'm going to formalize, and you go to do that and someone else already has that name, that's not going to be a good feeling. There are types of products that you have to have certain licenses and things for, so that is where it gets a little more iffy. Like if you're selling art prints, it's a pretty low risk business, not a lot of problems are going to go on there. But if you're doing food, you need to find out what the rules are around that type of food. In some places, there are special rules around farmers markets, bake sales. Like there's a kind of a threshold where items with a certain level of food safety so they don't spoil. So we're talking like jams and jellies or cookies and things with high sugar content. Those can be like under cottage rules or market rules. There may be something like that, but you need to look up the food safety rules in your area. And in that case, there's also going to be a distinction as to whether you need to have a commercial kitchen or not. But there's a lot of food you can make without a commercial kitchen. If you are making products for children, especially toys, there may be choking hazard stuff you need to look into. This is not my area of expertise, but I'm just telling you what I've heard, which is that things that are meant for kids can have more regulations about them. I don't know the threshold of like where it goes from being like a small business and doesn't matter to a big business and does matter. But I have heard that if you're selling things like dolls or toys, you have to market them as like decorative or like display only type toys. You can't say they're meant for kids to play with. Again, not my specialty, but just something to be alert. If you are trying to make that kind of product, there can be rules about that. And the other one that you may need licensing or some sort of certification for is anything medical related, especially if you're making any claims. Like if you're selling essential oils and just say they're nice, that's great. If you're selling them and say it cures depression, that's going to be regulated, I'm sure. And there's going to be sort of similar rules on insurance. Most events or big events will have insurance for the event, or the venue will have it. So there's going to be a certain level of protection, like if someone trips and falls or whatever. But you also want to think about your product, and is there a risk of someone having an issue with it? So for example, with the food business, with sea salt, we have a ton of insurance because it's a food. People are going to be eating that. We also wholesale, so there's a bigger business model there. But if your products are meant for kids and there's a choking hazard or any sort of consumables, you just want to think about the risk of your product, and if someone has something go wrong with it, what could happen. I don't think this is something to stress about in a big way. If your product is obviously something that people are consuming and you'll need insurance for, you can look into that. But if it's going to be something else, art prints, for example, it's pretty benign. You just want to make sure people don't get like hurt, paper cuts. I don't know. Okay, question 3 that I get a lot is, how do I find market events? How do I participate in them? How do I locate ones that are good? How do I know if it's going to be good? Those are hard questions. There are a couple things you can do that are pretty straightforward to find events. So number 1, follow local crafters and creators that go to these events on Instagram, Facebook, whatever platform. Instagram is honestly where I find almost all the events that I attend. You will see them sharing posts from events, being like calls for vendors, calls for artisans, things like that. That's where you can apply and just find the link and find the application in there. You can also join Facebook groups. There are usually local groups by region advertising craft fairs and shows looking for vendors. You're going to find a lot of events that are smaller there, things taking places in like community halls and churches, small fundraisers, things like that. So those events probably are going to have smaller turnouts, but they can still be a really good starting place, and you can find some unique ones in those Facebook groups as well. I also find events just by Googling around and looking through past events on Facebook, because if you find a market that ran, there's a lot of markets around Christmas, for example, if you're looking for Christmas markets and you found one that ran the year before, if it's running again, that's generally a good sign, because it means it was successful enough that people want to do it again, which means there's probably a lot of people who attended it. You can then look up the organizer, find out if they're advertising for vendors again, and also just reach out. I just send cold emails all the time to people saying, hey, is this event happening, or any more spots? I also find like sometimes you want to be a little bit brave, and just if an event is closed, like you missed the deadline or it's coming up already, there's always people who drop out. So I do sometimes, if there's an event I really want to be at and I completely didn't know about it until too late, I'll just email the organizers and say, hey, I recognize it's over. Totally cool if there's no spaces, but I just wanted to say if you have any vacancies or someone drops out, I'd love to fill that spot. Just saying. And here's links to my social or my business or whatever. And I've gotten into events like that because people don't want empty spaces. During the pandemic, a lot of people, like, there obviously weren't a lot of markets, but once they started coming back, it was more frequent that people would drop out last minute because of illness. And that happens anyways too. That's not necessarily situational. In terms of finding out if an event is good, that is going to be harder. So events that are new or small can be really unpredictable. You don't really know if people are going to show up, and there is an element of calculated risk to all of this. So if an event is brand new and really expensive, and maybe for me like involves like a drive, like an hour away, something like that, I might not be as keen to jump on it. My fridge just kicked in. Sorry if there's extra background noise now. I think to be successful running this kind of business, you really do have to be okay with taking some L's. And sometimes you do a show and it really sucks. And sometimes you do one and it's a surprise hit. I have I've like barely broken even on shows that were like huge, run by event companies, that just happened because it was a rainy weekend or something, or just no one came. I've been to one in like I did do one legendarily bad one, and I worked so hard, and so did everyone else, and nobody came. But I've also done $15 pop ups at a brewery where I made hundreds of dollars in 3 hours. So that it's really hard to know what to expect with events you've never tried before. If this is an event that has happened before, one thing you can do is reach out to vendors who were at the event last year and just say, hey, how was that event for you? Especially if they are in a similar category, maybe not direct competitors, but similar. But when I was starting out, especially with my art business, I only did events that were a bit more affordable. I was okay with doing a smaller show all the time. And then eventually I started doing the bigger ones, which are kind of hit and miss, honestly. Like I said, I've done really well at shows that cost next to nothing, and I've done okay at shows that were 3 days long and took so much time and effort. And it was just too big of a show or too many vendors like me. You can't always predict it. Unfortunately, that's the reality of this kind of business. And another thing is that I have noticed, and as have a lot of people in doing this kind of thing, that markets are not thriving. There's not, I think there are a ton of events, and people are not always attending all of them. So it may be the case that there was like a golden age of these craft markets, and maybe we're past that. But I think there definitely is success. I mean, I experience it on a weekly basis, luckily. I have a weekly market that I go to now, but I wouldn't say that it has been the same as it always has been at market shows. But I would say that I've been hearing mixed reviews about the more occasional shows, or newer ones. So you have to talk to people above all. I think that's the most important thing to find out if they're good. Take some risks, be aware of how much you're spending in terms of all of your costs, your gas, your fees, your material costs, and everything. Okay, the last question that I have before I just give you like a list of tips I have is how much do I bring to a show? This is so hard, and I completely understand why this is everyone's concern. It's my concern. I think about it every time I do a show, every single weekend. I'm like, how much am I bringing? Is it too much? Is it too little? Okay, number one rule, too much is always fine. You can always bring too much because the thing that you want to have on your table is abundance. It is going to be a very rare day when someone looks at your table and there's 2 items left on it and they go, I would like one of the 2 items, please. It is going to be much more common when someone looks at a full display and they go, ooh, a lot of things to look at. I want to look at it all. That's going to be way better for your business. You want to have backstock under your table that you can replenish when you sell things, and you want to have just a decent amount of inventory with you. So how much inventory is that? There is technically a formula you can try and use. I don't use this, but I have heard other people be successful with this, which is that there's about a 2 to 3% conversion rate for an event. So that means if you have an event with 100 people, 2 to 3 of those people are going to buy from you. That might sound low, but that's the reality of conversion rates, unfortunately. So that's like for 100 people at a show. If you have 1,000 people attending, what's that, 20 or 30 people? And that doesn't mean items, that just means transactions. And it's up to your business to figure out what is the most average transaction value that you do. That's not always going to be a predictable or accurate metric to use. It's generally going to be accurate, but not always. I would say it kind of tracks for the markets that I see every weekend. But then there's going to be a random market where nobody buys from you, or there's going to be a ton of people who come on a bus and they buy so much stuff and you didn't expect it. What I would recommend is that you think about, number one, what do I need to fill my table, and do I have enough to replenish if I sell it all out? And number two, what is my goal for how much I want to make this weekend, or day, or evening, whenever the time period is? Because when you have that goal in your mind, if you sell out, amazing, then no problem. Selling out is great. It actually took me a very long time to convince my mom when we were business partners that selling out is a good thing. Ideally, you have more product to sell, but it's not a bad thing when you sell out. It's data. You can use that data for future events. Anyways, ultimately, it's really hard to know how much to bring. Better to bring too much than too little, but at the very least, know what your costs are going into the event. How much do you spend on gas, transportation, fees to get in, products to manufacture, food you're going to eat while you're there. Do you need a hotel if you're traveling? Figure out what all that cost is, and then make sure that you're paying for all of that so that all your costs are covered. And then what do you want as your profit on top of that? In a realistic sense, of course. So those are the questions I get most commonly, and I did want to give you sort of just some quick fire tips that I thought of in addition to these questions. Okay, first tip, practice your setup ahead of time. Take all your stuff. If you don't have a table the size of the one you're going to be working on or a booth space or anything, just grab some painter's tape from the dollar store, mark it out on your floor, and make this space big enough so you can actually see what it's like. It is very hard to do all that logistics and planning in situ on the day of the event. And then also think about height in your booth too. Don't just do everything flat. Add risers to the back. You can use crates or boxes to make a second level. My second tip, price everything. I didn't used to do this, but then I started doing it and it worked really well because everyone stopped being confused about prices. And sometimes when people get confused, they get shy and then they don't ask you how much things are. So every single one of my art prints has a price sticker on it and there's a price right above them as well. It seems a little redundant, but it really helps. And then do use lots of signs. People like to stand there and read. They like to be informed. They want to engage with your booth. If they're standing there and the only thing to do is buy things, they're going to make the decision yes or no whether they want to do that pretty quickly. But if you can keep them around because they're reading, they're becoming more engaged with it, they're more interested, that's a good thing. It's going to increase your sales. To that same end, my next tip is find your conversation starters or your sales hooks. You need to find out what you can say to people to get them engaged in your business. And I'm not saying you have to do this for every single person. There are definitely days where I just don't want to talk to anybody and I just stand there behind my booth and I just look at them and smile and say hello. And that's enough. But when you really want to put on your sales hat, you do need to have something to talk to them about. So for example, it can be really simple. It doesn't have to be earth-shattering. I have books on my table that I've designed and written, and people are looking at the books and a lot of them don't make the connection that I wrote them, I made them, I designed them, I drew the covers. And so I'll say to them, yeah, I used to work as a book designer and these are all my personal projects from when I did that work. And then they make the connection that like, I'm a designer, I make the books, I do all that work, all the steps from me. That usually makes them pretty curious. I've actually even found people who are like, can you do illustrations on a children's book? And I don't do any freelance work right now. I won't say ever again, but I haven't for a while. So I say no, sorry, but it is a conversation starter and then we're talking and then people like to buy things. So that's really helpful. It is really good to have a story or something you can tell them that isn't too long. Like you have to read people as well. If they look like they are very scared that you're talking to them and they want to get out of there, don't keep giving them your sales pitch. I've certainly done this myself where I just decide I'm going to tell this person my whole business thing. And I just start doing word vomit at them and then I finish and I realize, oh, they want to leave. They don't want to buy anything from me. They're here to walk around and look at stuff. That's okay. But some people are really curious and chatty, and so you should be prepared for that. You can talk about your process, talk about your inspiration, talk about why you do what you do. If you have an interesting story, that is all good. Or you can keep it product focused and say, this is my best seller. This product is really new. This one, here's something special about how it's made. Just anything to talk about. It is good to be prepared. And that is something that you get through experience, but think about it ahead of time at the very least. Or if you're sitting behind your booth board, think about that then. And sort of related to that, if you can do samples or have an interactive element to your booth, that is a really good idea. When the sea salt business started doing samples, it completely changed sales. We made so many more because people would stop. As soon as customers stop, they're already more engaged. They're saying, catch my attention. I'm here. I've stopped. What do you have for me? And the samples work really well. So that could just be a little thing. If you're a food business, that maybe is obvious what samples could be good. But it could also be interactive. If you are selling jewelry, do they have a mirror and a place they could try on samples or of your styles? I've even seen people who are selling clothing and handmade items like that build a change room out of, I don't know, I think you can get them online. They're just like a little cubicle made like tent that is like a portable change room for the beach or something like that. People want to try on clothes, and as soon as you get them engaged in that sort of experiential trying or testing period, they are way more likely to close the sale. It's harder to find ways to use that kind of strategy in all businesses. I haven't figured it out with my art business yet. I don't have an interactive element. I did think about doing coloring pages, just like free printable coloring pages, but then I realized that kids would want the crayons. I don't have crayons and I don't want to be navigating that while I'm at work. So I haven't figured that out for the art business. A little bit easier for food or things you can try on, stuff like that. So that's pretty much it. Those are my tips, the things I can think of if someone was just starting out and wanted to know, like, what do I need to know to do this business? that's the key information. But of course, if I've missed something, I would love to tell you about it. So leave me a comment, let me know. If it's a big topic, I can do a video. If it's small, I'll just let you know my thoughts in the comments. But I really would like to know what you guys are curious about, because some of these things seem obvious to me because I've been doing this for so long, but the perspective is really helpful. And if you want to know more about me or my business, I can tell you that too. I don't know if that story is interesting to anybody, but I do this full time and I support myself full time from my creative work. And I have lots of free time to do pretty much whatever creative projects come up in my mind. So I love that, and happy to share stuff with you guys. Okay, I'm gonna stop rambling. Thank you so much for watching. If you made it this far in the video, amazing. Thank you. I'm happy that I could help. Check out my other videos if you liked listening to me talk. I do have some tutorials and I'm making new stuff all the time. So thank you again. Hope you have a really great day. Good luck with your business. Oh my gosh, good luck. I hope it works out. Let me know. Tell me what kind of business you want to start if you haven't already. What are you going to sell at your market? I would love to know. All right, have a great day. See ya.